Still doesn't look like it started.
I think it's showing live.
Yes, but in the LinkedIn
Okay.
event, it doesn't start. Okay, we are live now. Welcome everyone to this webinar. I think we can wait a few seconds in case someone plans to join. But yeah, so happy to be here today with John. I am Alejandra Rojas. I'm a researcher and I co manage the Hospitality Robotics Group together with Francisco Javier. And today I will be hosting this webinar. But before I introduce the speaker, I just want to take a few seconds to explain why are we having this conversation at all. When a hotel or restaurant invests in a robot, most of the conversation is around technical or financial aspects. And the conversation about the human side of these transformations is usually left behind. And those conversations are also relevant because research shows that the reason why the robots end up in the storage room or just sitting in the corner after a couple of months after the deployment is because of the human aspects. So, this conversation is about understanding how robots impact the human dynamics. And yeah, we want to understand how this impact a team, for example. I feel like everyone has experienced having a good or a bad colleague, someone that makes you feel motivated and supported, or someone that makes you feel that you don't want to go to work or that your work is even harder than before meeting this colleague. And robots are now part of these dynamics. So we want to explore that, and that's the conversation we're having today, and there's no one better to guide us through it than John Habib. John is a PhD candidate in human robot interaction at the University of Southern Queensland, where he specializes in robotics and service marketing and management. His research focuses on employee robot relationships. On top of his academic work, he brings industry experience. He has worked across service and hospitality internationally, which means he understands how these dynamics look like in practice, in the real world, not only in theory. John, thank you so much for being here today, for your time. And before giving you the floor, I just want to mention that if the audience has questions, you can type them on the chat and we will answer them in the last part of the presentation. Well, now, John, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Alejandra. Thank you for the kind introduction. Um, and just before I start, hello everyone first. And before I start, I just want to make a simple statement and continuation from what you said in the beginning, that robots really are no longer just machines on the floor, but they are also now becoming actors who shape the service relationships. Um, Before I start, also, I would like to acknowledge all the support and also collaboration with my supervisors and co-authors, Professor Catherine Prince and Associate Professor Park Daitkun, um, all participations and also for the reviewers' feedback. Um, so just to start with a brief what's going on in research as the state of art on what's happening when we talk about employee and robot interaction. There have been raise in the studies which focus now on employees and robots since probably 3 to 4 years back. That's the spike happened, but it goes back for a long time. What we have seen initially is in the beginning there was a lot of talks about how to adapt robots, how to get robots in workplace and make them work. So there was a lot of functionality, make robots easy to use, but also make them useful. And it was a lot heavy on machine-wise and how to make the machine work. But then recently things start to change, and we see now more organizational behavior, more psychology and sociology articles coming, which suggest that we need to approach robots from those lenses. So for now, we have, for example, some studies shows the reason robot intelligence as much robot become intelligent, it could now make employees feel insecure about their jobs. It could also affect their self-esteem. So, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But also this insecurity can lead them to move to another company who doesn't use robots. So employees also can hold the knowledge so they don't interact and share knowledge with robots because they feel if I share knowledge, I think tomorrow is going to take my job. And from there, some employees start bullying robots and so on. So what we're challenging today is from the old, research, which shows robots as machines. It's designed to make specific tasks and collaborate with humans. To now we see them as relational agents. And what we mean with relational agents is that robots can give human impressions that they are another entities, kind of. And they can be affected, and they can affect also the workplace. So it's not only in a set of specific location that robot is set to do the work, but now it's moving around. So we see all the vacuum, all the room service, and many other type of robots. There have been few foundational, dimensions when we talk about employee-robot interaction, and even for human-robot in general. So the first thing is anthropomorphism. And that what we talk about here is since old ages, people have give tendency to see, other entities similar to humans when it resemble human art, kind of. So, for example, we have seen people giving this to, statues for gods to anthropomorphize them, or we give it to, animals. We call them, so like you call your dog, for example, you're a good boy, or and we see how we can, make human picture for those objects and also non-humans. The other one that is very important as a foundation is social comparison. And what we say with social comparison, a lot of times when we talk to employees, what they feel, when you work with this robot, a lot of them, they would say, they can carry heavy, they can carry heavier than what I can do. They can work longer hours. And from there, we see there's tendency to compare ourselves to robots in terms of physicality, in terms of intelligence, and more. And that's not only in robots, it's driven from human also research. So human research has similarly social comparison. So it's a good thing that employees to be aware of.
And well, just a comment on social comparison. I saw a study that shows that employees can end up having burnout thanks to this comparison because, as you mentioned, it happens also with human colleagues that you compare to your colleagues and you feel that you are threatened because they might do things better than you. But when you compare to a robot, it's even more relevant, the comparison, because they have much better capabilities in some sense, of course, not in terms of empathy and social skills, but they have more energy, literally. And this is kind of like an unintended consequence of deploying robots, because usually we would think that we will reduce the burnout in employees because now they have a robot who can help them do the most difficult and demanding tasks. But at the same time, we are increasing this emotional burnout because now they feel they are comparing themselves to something that is not in the same level, right? So it's interesting, how do you manage burnout in the context of social comparison?
It's actually very insightful comment. Yes, I agree. There is a lot of studies which shows burnout when we use robots at workplaces, and it's, as you said, it's physical burnout because we also chasing robots failures, but also emotional because now I'm given tasks to do, but I still need to assist with what robots does. And as of date, there is a lot of failures on the floor from robots which are used in hospitality. So, for example, there are failures in going in a specific route to reach the table. If we change the allocation of tables, um, there is some incidents that robot hit, for example, another guest or drop drinks and so on. So for me as a staff, I need to now take care of what robot does also, which
Yeah.
can add emotional burnout kind of.
Mm. Yeah, I read in your study that people are thinking something like, right now the robots are not super smart, not super capable, but in the future, when they will improve the technologies, then we will be even more worried. So right now we're in this time when we can be chill, let's say, in this moment, but in the near future, we're not sure. So the burnout is gonna increase slowly with time.
Yeah, well, again, I think there will be more research coming on that, but I would guess we're leading towards human-robot collaboration, and so ideally, we want both humans and robots to collaborate to achieve a specific task, which
Yes.
is that's the ultimate goal. Apart from any displacement would happen because there might be new jobs obviously created from that. Even so
Yeah.
far, there is a lot of in the job tasks. A lot of things are very heavy, and carrying weights, making things repetitive, which robots can take off that load and can do more efficient work, I would say.
Perfect.
Awesome. The next one is and very important foundation is social cognition. I think that one of my favorite, I would say, theories. Um, and if you think about situations, you meet new person, you have, for example, a friend, some different type of friends on Instagram that someone take photos for travel, someone take photos in restaurants, and so on. What the social cognition does, it says that yeah, just in the back of our mind or even unconsciously, we categorize people so for our brain to function easier. So I can just define people in categories. Oh, this person is funny, this person is slow, this person is smart, and so on. Again, that's change with more interactions, which shape that. So, and the same thing happens with robots. And please also see the robots and categorize them. If this robot is helpful, this robot is broken, this robot does a lot of trouble, or if it can, ease my work and so on. So that's one of the foundations which would lead later to the relationships.
Mm.
There have been a lot of also a beginning of studies about reciprocity, which is its main dimension of relationships. So we see in human-human relationships, it's more reciprocal. So when employees does something for another employee, it will be returned somehow. So that's why we have a lot of support in organizations because you do good, I do good, and so on. But when it comes to robots, it's different because robots are also not really human and they are also not machines. So they are not expected as the same to do good for them. So some employees still also do favors for robots or to organizations, which make a point here that the robot is semi-human and machine. So it's not fully machine. So we can't really say approach as machine, but also we cannot say approach it as human. And that's the sweet spot, is to make it a hybrid in the theories. The last foundation we have in here is the cultural difference. We see a lot of differences or more acceptance when we talk about collectivism as a culture in a comparison, for example, to Western or individualism. So people tend to have acceptance or ease to work with or to also be served from robot. So if you read a lot of news recently or even watch a lot of videos, I think it's moving now towards enforcing or more making publicity of accepting robots. So 5 years ago, when you see a robot talking to a human, you would say something is wrong, but now it's actually more promoting that with more expectation of humanoid robots to be developed soon, which that's what Elon Musk is saying. All right, so now is what does all that mean? So these were just to position robots that they are not humans, they are not machines, they are part human machine. And we anthropomorphize them, so we think them as humans. So now we have 3 dimensions that we will talk about, and then we go to the relationships with robots. The first one is the agency. And when we see agency, for example, when we talk to employees, they talk a lot about the robot stopped in the middle of the way, or the robot did not deliver to a specific table. It did not understand what it carries, if it's hot drink, cold drink. So there was a bit of hesitation here of, is the robot submissive or assertive? Does it take decisions and make things or no? But also there was a lot of contradictions. So I want the robot to be agentic. I want it to be autonomous. So I want it to take decision, carry plates, clean dishes, and so on. But also I'm scared because if it does it, it becomes similar to me. So it might take my job. So that was like, we want to work with a strong people, but we're still insecure about it could take our jobs, kind of. Which something I think that would be good for management or as a culture to implement. Like, you work with something strong, but doesn't mean that it's going to replace you in a certain way. We've seen also a lot of flexibility and navigation. So, for example, like humans are, the build of human body is more flexible. It can navigate, in narrow corridors, it can move, understand, but also it can navigate, it can understand context and move around.
Before you change the slide, I just wanted to comment on what you mentioned because I think it's super interesting in terms of from the perspective of designers and developers of robots. How can you design the level of agency that is right for service staff, right? Because if the robot is super smart and super autonomous, then they will feel scared. But at the same time, they want the robot to be competent because that's not the only way, but one of the main paths to trust the robot. And that's, as you say, you need to find a sweet spot between those aspects so people feel safe with their jobs, but also trust that the robot is very capable of doing the job. But yeah, we can continue with the conversation.
Yeah. So I think what we have seen is agency usually, so agency impact the competence. And that's, some sayings came out to say, fake it until you make it. Or just when you appear assertive, people might think you are competent because it's part of affecting competence. And we have seen that robot agency actually affect competence. But when it comes to the relationships, we have seen that when the agency is not translating into competence, then it's just leading to competition. So I could be agentic, but I am not. We will talk about this in the next slides, but
Okay.
I could now contradict with your agency, because when we say in human object relationship, both human and object has some sort of agency, but they are part of assemblage. They are part of component. So if you affect, when you put more agency, the other person has to go back more submission. So it contradict. So when humans now work in hospitality, it's more about teamwork, collaboration. But if the robot does not consult with me or does not consider me, then this assertiveness is actually hurting as a team. So I wouldn't really collaborate. In fact, I would think, it might do the job, but I don't like it. Kind of.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah. So competence were affected much with agency, as we said. Like the more agentic or assertive, people thought it could be skillful or capable. It's also efficient and effective in doing things, because you would like to work with someone to tell you when something wrong is going on. You don't want also to work with someone to, like, when there's an urgent task with the robot, I would like to know that, okay, you want to go first, for example, and then I can follow you, kind of. So that was part of competence. And the important thing in competence that we've seen in collaboration, complementary and supplementary relationships, the things which are positive in relationships, were actually driven from competence. So it was very essential to have competent robot on the floor when it does its job. And then the communion is something which affect both now. So we speak to a staff and we say, would you like the robot to be warm, like to be welcoming and, just giving affirmation and so on? And there was also contradictions, because people say, yes, I would like to have that, but other people said, I don't care. It's there just to do the job. For me, I'm relating to humans. I don't know even what I'm talking about. It was actually, a lot of people thought, like, what are you talking about relationship, kind of. So when we talk about now the communion, it's divided in two things. When we talk about feedback and adaptability, so communion means I am part of, again, assemblage. I should be impacted. So I can learn and adapt, or I can receive feedback. But when we talk about social cognition, it's more about warmth and, positive attitude or connecting with humans, kind of.
And these two aspects are enabled by AI, I assume, because learning and adaptability, communication, feedback, the emotional part, I'm not sure, but the rest, everything is enabled by the new AI systems. And before we couldn't really reach communion before having the advanced AI we have these days, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it is impacted by understanding language, understanding tasks, and then learning from the context around them. But still, if the robot does not have even AI, it can be only as object, for example, and that would be being impacted by the environment, which means I can push it away, for example,
Yeah.
or I can keep it on the side, kind of. But AI takes it to another level, so I can do personalization with the stuff. and so on. You can take feedback of what do you like to do, what you don't like to do, and so on.
So you
Um,
can change, well, you can control the level of warmth with AI.
yeah, absolutely. And now, because it's a service style, it's all about warmth and about guest connection. So to come again to the point which we were talking about initially, is robots, like, is the warmth important or competence? And actually competence is more important, but
Mm.
warmth takes it to another level. So when we see in competence, we're affecting positive relationships, but when we had now warmth, it spiked or doubled the strength of this relationship. So what we're trying to say is, raise the agency, make the robot autonomous, but also you need to raise communion. So we reach collaboration or supplementary.
Mm. Okay.
Um, so as a result, like, we classify 4 categories. We said the complementary is only impacted by the competence. So it does not impact by communion, warmth, or even agency. So we need the agency to affect the competence to make robot competent, and that would be complementary relationship. So just explain complementary what it is. It's adding value to me or adding something I don't have. Physical strength, intelligence, anything that I don't have in operation. Um, and then we do have collaborative, which is high agency and high communion. So it's all about task interdependence, shared goals. I would like to um, I would like to give agency to you, but you give agency back and also feedback in both ways. So we can work on the same task together. Then we have competition, which is you are high in agency, you are, uh, as a robot is taking away from employee agency and a teamwork. So it become now two against each other, which is seen as, job insecurity or self-status threat. And then the last thing is supplementary, which it says, like, we have perceived things in common, similarities. So we can do, if we are doing the same task, we checking in the guest or greeting the guest at the door. So you can be deployed as a robot in peak hours, for example, to assist the staff. But then, for example, in a kitchen, you could have complementary, which I need physical strength or something I don't have. And then let's say collaborative work, artwork, or I mean anything which I don't think of robot in sales and marketing, but things are collaborative there, so you could have this kind of collaboration.
Okay, so if we look at these 4 types of relationships, would you say that collaborative and complementary are the ones that are more, yeah, more desirable for people to achieve when they want to implement robotics? Of course, assuming that the competitive relationship is non-desirable, but what about the other 3? From what I see from my perspective and thinking about tasks, the supplementary is when you don't divide the tasks. You can just bring the robot to do the same tasks you're doing, and maybe tomorrow you don't have the robot, but you don't mind because it's not part of the a well-designed task allocation. The collaborative is very interdependent. Like, you really need the robot because tasks are designed in a way that you are working together, and if the robot is not there, then you cannot achieve the goal. And complementary means that you have divided the tasks, and therefore you do need the robot, but you are independent. Let's say you work in the kitchen and the robot is delivering the food on the table. So you are independent but still part of the whole goals achievement. So in this sense, what should hospitality managers aim for?
Yeah, good question. So I think hospitality manager would aim for allocating or deploying the right robot and right place, but also training staff, which we will see in the next few slides. It's very important for staff to be involved and trained when it comes to robot depletion. So as you said, like in complementary, for example, in the kitchen, I would like a robot not to be cooking robot because I have a chef who can, understand taste and recipes and so on. But I want something to move heavy lifting or clean stuff and so on, so I can work as a human capacity on it. But for example, in delivering to room service robots or cleaning robots, we would ideally need some collaboration between staff and them. So I would like to ask, we need to ask each other or coordinate with each other towards shared goal, which is delivering something, for example, to our room. Supplementary, as you said, I would see it as seasonal hotel. They want to have specific number of staff, so I would ideally have supporting robots. So those are out when operation is busy. Long queues, peak hours, so on. So you could have those robots going around, for check-in or giving wristbands and so on.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. So first understanding the context, the situation, and then seeing which type of relationship is a better fit. Yeah. And I was also thinking in terms of time, because I was reading in your paper that to have a collaborative relationship, you need to build trust. Because if you are interdependent with a robot, then you need to trust that the robot will do its part and that you will therefore be able to do your own part thanks to the robot collaboration. And so I'm thinking that in terms of time, maybe you can start with a complementary relationship where robot has its own tasks, human have its own tasks, and they don't depend in each other. But then with time, with the improvements of technology, with the with in adding with used the robot and end up having a collaboration at a time perspective, or what do you think?
So what I'm of is impacting the relation. I really what the concept you said correct. You can have complementary, which is only competence, but when you add now the features of receiving information and so on, or knowledge sharing, then I could allocate this robot now to collaborative things. So instead of robot arm, which just does repetitive thing, now I could have another robot which move around or something kind of. But trust is another like big thing when it comes to collaboration. And yeah, I mean, there is I would say there must be more research would come on it as a topic.
Yeah.
But for now, we see there is when there is service failure or like staff trust robots in certain things, but they don't. So they trust they can, for example, like if it does something good, then yeah, they can send it there. But if the robot make, for example, accident in a specific part of a restaurant, they don't trust it anymore, or they don't trust it to serve group tables.
Yeah.
So ideally, do observe it over time, and if it become better, then yes, I could start trusting the robot.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Um, All right, so here we're talking about the self-efficacy or confidence on how you handle the situation. There have been some research before saying that when you train staff or involve them in implementation is important. But what we have seen now, why it's important, because when you raise the robot agency and now I'm creating competition with humans, when I train staff, then I'm also raising agency of the staff or the ability to affect the situation. So if you see this video that has been viral in the news, the dancing robot, it's very funny video. So just start dance and take a space, and it was having the moment as a robot. But then the staff, they were trying to manage two conflict inside themselves. I need to smile because I'm in service, but I need to control the robot faster because before it does any, harm to the operation. But it took so much time and a lot of people to control the situation. And I would say my personal observation here is if you raise the self-efficacy or train the employees on those certain scenarios and operations or certain features of robot, involve them in implementation, I think this could have been handled much quicker. So it took about a minute, 20 seconds or something to control it. But I think if this situation happened again, then I know where to switch it off, kind of.
Yeah, I think it was funny in a way that you need three people to stop the robot when you would assume that they have been trained to do it quick, that there should be a button or something in the app where they can stop it in a second, but apparently not. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that self efficacy is basically to believe in your own abilities to do something. So it's very important that employees believe in their ability to manage the robot, because if they don't trust themselves, then they would be stressed when they are working to think, oh my god, I hope the robot is working well, because otherwise it would be a show like in the video. And here I think it's also important that trainings should be not only about how to do it technically, but also create a sense of problem solving and curiosity and self trust in employees, so they are sure they can manage things when these problems happen.
And you would be surprised that a lot of places they depend on the easy use of robots because we make technology work like easy to use to understand it quicker. So a lot of places actually don't train their employees on how to use it because they think it's easy to use it. But again, as you said, it's not only how to use it as a machine, but I want to know in which situation happen, what scenarios happen, and so on, which lead to the next part, impression management. And that's very like core of the service, what we do in hospitality. So the guest comes, I know what I'm gonna say on welcome, Mr. Alex. This is, you have booked this specific room type, and if you would like to have upgrade and so on, and these are the facilities. So I'm acting in a way as employee. I have a very specific or scripted scenario that I'm following. But when things happen and conflict happen inside the operation, that's where the improvisational rule come. So you come to complain about something new to me, then I need now to show empathy and also I need to solve the problem. But also I need to be correct in the way I speak to you as a guest. So what we're trying to say here is robots are becoming intelligent, they're becoming agentic, and also they have communion. So they are now actors in the service. So what we're trying to say, you need to rethink or redesign the service scenarios. So it's not only now about the staff is welcoming the guest, but also what is the role of robot in here, what it can do in this performance as interaction kind of or act towards the guest. What kind of a script I need to give each now, and as both, the set script and improvisational. Um, also where this robot sits. Does it sit in the front stage, which where it interact with, customers and other employees, or it's in the backstage where it support them? So as a manager or consultant, I think it's important to now deploy the robot or understand when you switch off the robot from front service to back service, what it should do now, how it should act, and what kind of script it should have, kind of. So I need to be in the back office supporting stuff, or it doesn't have to be official language or whatever, but in the guest, I need to have different attitude, I would say.
So this impression management is related to the SOPs, to designing the standard operating procedures, and also the improvisational roles, which I think is very important because, as you say, you don't know how the robot will fail. So you have to manage the impression towards or facing guests, right? Because that's the most important thing in the end, how guests will experience. Yeah.
Yeah, which again, that's like both operation and also developing. Ideally they should be working together towards a way to design those kind of scenarios and script and so on.
So in this sense, I just a comment. I'm thinking that the hospitality managers need to work together with the tech developers to understand also what the robot is able to say in certain scenarios. They should create the script together. Yeah,
Absolutely.
in the continuous innovation, like, okay, maybe we need to change the script. So the technical people in the development team need to be mindful of what's needed on the floor in the real hospitality settings.
Yeah, which again like comes for developing robot in a way that it can receive feedback and be impacted. So now I'm a manager, I'm designing or allocating tasks. I have accessibility to do that. So now we can do that, for example, in mapping floors, changing dimensions and so on, but it's all very technical.
Hmm.
So ideally, you would want to speak natural language to it, teach those scenarios, and then deploy it in a mass deployment kind of, and have version of luxury hotels, smaller scales, and so on, and personalities and this kind of interactions. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have reached the part of the questions. So let me check if anyone has any comment or question, you can just type it in the chat. Right now, we have some comments. Well, people thanking us for this event. Also, Taki Jafari said, a robot without AI in hospitality doesn't sound exciting. I agree.
Yeah.
And he also said, currently there are hotels who are using robots, but you need an operator for the robot all the time. So yeah, teleoperated robots usually.
That's a good
In
comment actually.
your research, did you ask them if it was teleoperated or autonomous, or what did you see?
Um, it's a lot of it now is in between, I would say, but a lot of robots and hospitality still follows certain rules.
Mm.
So you could easily change the dimensions of restaurant or something, but you need to still play on the back end of robot to understand it. So it's not fully AI integrated.
Hmm. Taki Jafari just asked, what are your thoughts in the way if the robot's application will be more costly in the current market? So, if the robot application will be more costly in the current market, you mean with AI? Like robots will be more costly with AI in the current market?
Um,
Maybe he.
Just to think as a cost of acquiring and deploying robots. If
I
yes,
think
I
so.
would doubt it because now it's more about mass scale or mass production. So eventually those scripts and scenarios and so on would be deployed and it would be cheaper to buy a bulk because let's say a Marriott want to deploy standard of robot, they can have it across 1,000 hotels or something.
Yeah, scalability.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's 1,000 hotels, but yeah, kind of.
We have another question from Yue Tan. It says, "Thank you for sharing, John. What are your thoughts on using robots in heritage hotels or other sensitive areas, such as historic museums? How can we ensure a perfect customer journey without compromising authenticity? How about making sure the perfect customer journey without eroding the authenticity?"
Yeah, awesome. I, I think one of the initial conversations I had with professors, he was asking serious questions about authenticity. How can we make it authentic as a robot? I don't have an answer yet to that, but from the approach, what we are talking about in this session, um, you would now think of the how it looks like because even in robots we judge as humans how they look like.
Mhm.
There are some research showing, for example, different treatment of clothing on robots or in gender of robot and so on. So as a heritage, I would think you would want to have it a specific part of the theme and also part of the way it talks. Um, Plus, it has to be efficient, so it has to be competent. That's no question because otherwise it would, you know, knock another historic site or something. So you wouldn't want that and those kind of places. Uh, there is still not a lot of solid answers on how to use robots in like in luxury places or in a specific areas, which I think that's something important in the future.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Mauricio. Thank you, John, for the presentation. Can you please tell us about prioritization conflicts?
Prioritization conflict.
Yes, I'm not sure, Mauricio, if you can specify prioritization in which sense. And Taki explained that his question about robots application being more costly in the current market, he means if we apply the robots instead of human resources. Like, what is more costly to you hire
Okay,
humans or use robots?
a good question. Uh, I think robots are like a lot of people say it's one-time cost. Stuff has ongoing wages, so that's one element, but it's requiring maintenance. It affects the service standard. So as far the robot is part of the service standard that aligns with it and also is aligning with how employees perceiving it. So it does not make competition with them or it does not lead a lot of your good employees to leave the place, feel insecure. So it's how you manage it. I would say the cost of, if we're talking about cost of acquiring it, I would think it's cheaper than stuff ongoing. But if we're talking about cost psychologically, that would be
Mhm.
in your hand to manage as a manager or as deployer in a way to collaborate more than compete.
Mm, yeah, very human-centric answer. I love it. We have another question from Christian. What do you see as the most critical barriers for the robot adoption? And what are factors that help overcome these barriers?
So the barriers as of the moment is the competence. That's a big barrier. There's not a lot of robots that really does the task 100% when it comes to hospitality. So it's good in repetitive tasks, coffee machine that it's making pictures on coffee and so on, coffee arm, but not really the service robots. So we don't have yet front office or service robot that it's fully competent without accidents and so on. So that's one of the barriers. The other barriers, I would say, the service style. Luxury service is more perceived from very different dimensions on, the status of humans and the experience and connection. So I'm going to have experience from humans, but I think that's also changing. So it's now how robots can also support the stuff in the back areas, for example, or work with humans. There is a lot of barriers from culturally. So as we said in the beginning, some cultures accept it easier than others. So I think that's the major three.
Thank you, John. Now, Mauricio is explaining that his question about the prioritization conflicts is, for example, conflicts in bias in the human-robot interaction within collaboration tasks.
And bias and human-robot interaction. So
Yes.
we prefer humans, do you mean, than robots, right?
Yeah.
Or how to handle a conflict, I would say, between human and robot.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the perspective, but yeah, I imagine is.
So I just from the part of conflict, there is a lot of, like, it's a relationship, so there's a lot of conflict, and now is how to come together as, the three main things, the developers and also managers mainly, and employees, on how to design right scenarios and the operations to avoid at least those conflicts from competition, for example, conflict or conflict over resources. Like robots might have different resources than humans. Yeah.
Great. I think we should go to the last part of the presentation because we're running out of time. And
Okay.
yeah, we can start with the takeaways.
Yeah. So I think we have three takeaways to wrap up the conversation. So for hospitality manager now, what's for you is the team integration. So when you adopt robot, don't think of it as only machine or it's a technology. Think of it as additional team member who is relational. So employees would judge you as organizations, but also collaborate with it, so it can make my work better or worse. It can also thinking about task allocation, which type of robot, where am I allocating them? Very important training. I need to train employees on how to use it, but also on what scenarios to navigate. One is also very important is monitoring those relationships. So as a human resources, we have always surveys on how engaged we are, what do you think about your workplace, and so on. I think it's very important for those surveys to say, what do you think about robot, and involve those dimensions of agency and communion. So from there, I can understand what relationship is going on the floor and what actually we are looking for as staff. So I don't want to cause insecurity and turnover because of robot, but I also want them to collaborate with it.
Of course, because the turnover in hospitality is super high and you don't want to make it worse with the implementation of robots because that would cause the complete opposite result that you would expect, right?
100%, yeah. And lastly, the impression management. So we spoke about that, designing rules, how it looks like, and what kind of things it should say. And then for designers and developers, just there's no, like, the minimum thing is to be competent. So when the robot is designed to do something, it has to fully do it without any interruptions. or at least to be very strong in what it does. So if it's delivering to tables, taking orders, whatever, we need to think of something that doesn't break competence, so I can assure positive relationship. We need to think of agency. So I would like it to be agentic, but also as a staff, I don't want it to conflict with my agency. So how can you raise agency, but give agency cues? Autonomy, but also it has to tell, hey, I'm going to do something. And then raise the warmth of robot when you raise the agency. So as much you are making it intelligent, then it has to relate and it has to be warm and so on and receive feedback. And then how it can be adaptable. So it's not only one size fits all robots. We need to think of it as it can be flexible and adaptable in the future, kind of. So optimal solution is kind of collaboration. And lastly here for consultants and sales. So think of it as we said, it's not technology only, but it's relational agent. So first we diagnose what's going on in the workplace. So to understand what's the issue we're trying to solve, and then we clarify the business aims of why do you want to have robot, and then we ideally map also, like identify what relationship to map in this concept or what we're trying to do in the kitchen, for example. So I would like to work on this relationship in the kitchen and then align the rule and also the placement with the service. And lastly, to position them as partners, not only infrastructure. Yeah, so just as a summary, it's not only tools for robots nowadays, it's also relational agents who shape work and service.
Thank you, John. I think the key takeaways you presented are super relevant to create a strategy, not to step away from just deploying robots and focusing on the technical aspects, but creating and designing the task allocation, the way the relationships should look like, how the training should be strengthened with problem solving. So thank you so much for providing this framework of the 4 types of relationships that can be created with humans and robots. And yeah, well, thank you again for your time and for sharing your knowledge. Very valuable for this hospitality robotics group. And just to
Awesome.
close, if you don't have anything to say, I hope we can continue the conversation in the LinkedIn group. And thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time.
Alejandra. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. It was very interesting.
Great. Thank you so
Sorry.
much. And
See ya.
hopefully we can continue